So the third food, I would add some type of wild fatty fish. Salmon is a great option, rich in DHA fat, which we know is one of the most important structural building blocks of the brain. 60% of your brain is made of fat, and DHA fat is accounts for about half of that. And we don't ingest a ton of DHA fat on a daily basis. We ingest a lot of omega-6 fats, which are to some degree essential. But we need to balance out the fats in our brain cell membranes with DHA. So wild fatty fish is a great source of that. And salmon in particular, which I think is like going to be the most common or easily accessible choice for most people, also contains a compound called astaxanthin, which was highlighted in a paper recently published by longevity researcher Bruce Ames as a putative longevity agent. It's just a really powerful pro-longevity compound, good for skin health, eye health, brain health. Okay. And then, of course, wild fatty fish is a great source of protein. So wonderful source of the full complex of essential amino acids that are important for supporting muscle protein synthesis, which we know is important.
Reasons why most everyone should want to get their muscles stronger is that muscles are generally getting progressively weaker across the lifespan. So when I say getting stronger, it's not necessarily about being able to move increasing amounts of weight in the gym, although if that's your goal, what I'm about to discuss will be relevant to that, but rather to offset some of the normal decline in strength and posture and the ability to generate a large range of movement safely that occurs as we age. As I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, we just tend to lose function in this neuromuscular system as we get older. And doing things to offset that has been shown again and again to be beneficial for the neuromuscular system, for protection of injury, for enhancing the strength of bones and bone density. So there are a lot of reasons to use resistance exercise that extend far beyond just the desire to increase muscle size. Because I know many of you are interested in increasing muscle size, but many of you are not.
For clinicians, it's good to check up on glucose for your patients, but there's more to it than that. For those who might have prediabetes or be headed to type 2 diabetes or have metabolic syndrome, another way to monitor this is to be checking up on insulin levels or triglyceride levels. So for this insulin resistance situation, you can be catching that early on before this heads into type 2 diabetes. And from a dietary perspective, this is pretty straightforward. This just means being extra vigilant about added sugars and refined grains, getting those out of the diet. Those are the things that spike the glucose and spike the insulin, and that leads to the insulin resistance. So you want to be replacing those with a combination of whole grains, vegetables, and beans on the one hand. Those are good quality carbohydrates instead of low quality carbohydrates. And on the other side, you could substitute those refined grains and added sugars with avocados, nuts and seeds, fatty fish, good olive oil on a salad. So those would be high-fat substitutions for the low-fat carbohydrates. Those would be your strategies for addressing this.
You know, whatever we don't have time to deal with during the day, or whatever we choose not to deal with during the day, it's going to make an appearance at night. Yeah. It's going to come in and swoop and say, hello, here I am. Like, you get to deal with me now when you want to be sleeping. So there's a number of different types of tools that we use to work with thoughts and feelings. Have you ever heard the thought, don't believe everything you think?
Yes.
It can be pretty dangerous. Right. So that comes to mind. Working with thoughts, an initial way to think about these approaches is that we identify what we call dysfunctional thoughts. So thoughts that, you know, they're not really serving us, and also they're not super true. So for example, black and white thinking, right? If I don't nail this interview, my career is over, right? Like these complete black and whites. We've also got personalization type things. Oh, that person left a negative comment in my Twitter. That must mean I am the worst presenter ever, right? So we can take these things. And then there's also my favorite, one of my fan favorites is shoulding all over people or shoulding all over yourself. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. I should have that done, right? So these kinds of thoughts. Whenever a thought falls into a particular category of dysfunctional thought, and I have a fun list that I can share with you of different types of these, chances are the thought is not all the way true. And we do an exercise called a thought record, where we look at evidence for a thought, evidence that it's true. We look at evidence that it isn't true. And I mean, we really look. I have spent an hour at a time on one thought with a patient before, where we look for all of the possible evidence that it's true, all of the possible evidence that it's not true. And then we have to develop a new thought that acknowledges both the evidence that it is true and the evidence that it isn't true.
I think part of the problem with goals is that they don't tell you how to get to where you're going. A better thing to do is to use a system. So the idea behind a system rather than a goal is that a system is saying things like, I'm a writer, my goal is to finish writing this book, but I'm not going to think about it that way. Eventually I'll have 100,000 words, but what my system will be that for an hour every morning I will sit in front of my computer screen and I will type. It doesn't matter what that looks like. I'm not going to evaluate the number of words. I'm not going to set some benchmark, some artificial number or benchmark that I should reach. What I'm going to do is just say, here's my system, an hour a day in front of the screen, will do what I can, bam. And the thing is, every time you set a system and you stick to it, you're achieving something. Instead of a goal that you're failing, essentially, for long periods of time until you reach the goal, you're succeeding every day as long as you adhere to your system. And you end up getting to the same place, but that framing is so much more effective. It gives you the kind of positive feedback you seek. And a system is kind of geared towards psychological well-being.